Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Operations and Public Safety Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 7th, 2021, and this is our only Operations and Public Safety meeting for the month of December. So welcome to anyone that's joining us. We will get started first with the roll call. And Kim, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Council President Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to approval of the agenda, are there any changes from council or staff? Seeing none, a motion would be in order.
Thank you, Council President. I would move for the approval of the minutes.
All right.
Well,
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion is approved. Next up, we have the approval of the minutes from our November 16th, 2021 meeting. Anybody have any questions? All right, seeing none?
Yeah, if none, as Madam President, I would move for the approval of minutes for November 16th, 2021.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Approval of the minutes passes. Next, we get into the business of our meeting today. First on the list is payment of bills. Those come to council members through email. Anyone have any questions about those? All right, then a motion to approve.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move for the payment of the bills.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passing of the motion for passing of the bills is approved. Next up, we have non-represented salary study. This too will require action by council, and I'd like to welcome HR Director Teri Smith. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council President Troutner and council members. It's a privilege to be here and ask for your indulgence as I talk about this RFP for consultant services for a non-represented salary survey. So we're asking you to authorize a comprehensive salary survey. So this is all of our non-represented employees. There's about 250 employees, and they occupy about 150 different job classifications. So it is a fairly robust survey. The survey that we have done for the non-reps since I started back in 2020 has been done, or excuse me, 2000, mercy, has been done internally. So we've used internal staff to conduct, the market survey, notify employees, have meetings, handle appeals. So we've done all of that internally. We're at a point now where it makes sense for us to kind of check our assumptions. Are we doing things, best practices? Are we keeping up with, the market? And so we hope to, and the goal of the RFP will be to gather information from a consultant who's actually, we're seeking somebody who knows the market, works with public sector, knows what our comps are doing, and just do a deep dive. Actually, they will be tasked with reviewing our job descriptions, ensuring that there's some DEI framework that we are sure to include in those job descriptions, or, contrary, maybe removing some things that could be barriers. So we're asking for their input on that as well. We'll do the update to the job descriptions, but we're asking for their input on, again, best practices. I think I went through the rest of the items on my notes here. You might be asking, why aren't we doing this internally? But that's really, it's just a good point in time, having done this for 20 years internally. And we do look at the non-represented employees. We try to do that about every 3 years, along the lines of a contract negotiation, so trying to keep some equality there with regard to a review of their salaries. But with the pandemic and then our office having implementation last year, we're actually out of sync a little bit. So we're a couple years beyond our 3-year period that we really want to look at this. So it gives us a great opportunity, I think, to dive in.
All right. Councilmember Thomas, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Madam President. So Terry, you've already answered, I think, one of my questions, why isn't this done in-house? But I don't see a cost associated with this ordinance. Do you have nothing?
I have kind of a big picture based on what our comparable cities have done, and it's anywhere from 40,000 maybe up to 100,000 is what some of our jurisdictions that have recently done comp studies through a vendor. So the RFP, we didn't put any value. We're just looking for interested and qualified people. But we have an idea.
Okay, well, it's quite a ways difference between 40,000 and 100,000. But I understand the complication here, getting a specific amount. But all right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. I was tagging up on what Les was saying. Will you bring this back to us? I mean, once you know what the price is going to be for approval, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. That's fine. When you go out, when you say non-representative, I mean, what we talking like? Finance, accounting, what type of job are we looking at?
We're talking about positions. There's a lot of our folks in engineering, for instance, are non-represented. Our managers, for the most part, are non-represented. Our attorneys are non-represented. So the folks in finance, other than the managers, are represented by AFSCME for the most part. Folks down in operations are Teamsters. So it's, of our 600 and some, almost 700 employees, 250 are non-represented.
If it's okay, and I'm assuming the council is okay, I'm just curious, because I like this type of stuff. Could you just give us just a list of the particular job that fall in this category? Don't need it today, but.
Okay, yeah, gosh, yeah, of course.
I'm just curious, just to be clear. And also, when you go out, there's a big difference between the private and the government. So it's probably too early to say, because for the most part, in the private sector, you take a turn like ours, probably make twice as much money, so that wouldn't be a good comparison, right? So how will you go about? Will you just strictly look at city by city type of thing? Pretty much would be your base that you'll look at.
Yes. So we look at. You've heard maybe the term before, comparable cities.
Yep.
And so we have a list of those, and that's another item that we'll be asking the consultant to review. Is that list of comparable cities still applicable to us today? And so we don't do a private sector market review.
And my last question is, what is the turnover ratio yearly for the cities of Kent? Do you know roughly?
I don't off the top of my head. Do you know, Nat?
It averages usually anywhere from 6 to 9%.
And that's about average. I know in the private sector, about 7%. So.
It seems to be in line with our comparable cities.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Fincher.
Hi. If the project starts on time in February, it's supposed to end 6 months later. When do we get to hear back?
So we have built into the RFP check-ins. So we'll be doing that with ELT and staff. And then we've also asked that council is kept apprised. And so Natalie will be the project manager of this. And so expect to see her back here during key points during the project, and maybe even with the consultant to keep you in the loop.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then Derek, did you have something you wanted to add?
Thanks, Terry. I just wanted to clarify the form in which this will come back before the council. This will need to come back as an amendment to the budget in order to add the funds to do the survey. If the proposal comes back at less than $100,000, that's within the mayor's contracting authority. So that wouldn't require council approval, but we would certainly let you know about that. And then, of course, once we get recommendations from the consultant and are ready to implement them, that will require council action in the form of a budget amendment and/or the 23-24 biennial budget as well.
You just answered my last question, because I'm saying if the data will come back and it say we way off, you wouldn't necessarily wait until 2 years from now. We might make some adjustment right away.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, with that, a motion would be in order.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move to authorize a comprehensive salary study of approximately 250 non-represented employees.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, Teri. Motion passes. Next on the agenda, I'd like to welcome Chief Padilla. We have some information on new conversations in training.
All right, good afternoon, Madam President, members of the council. Thank you for this time. Just circling back on a deliverable that was at your request last year. If you remember, we all attended the new conversation training with Mr. Dwayne Bryant. Out of that training, I think we had a pretty resounding supportive nod from the council to get this to all of our police officers, and I'm happy to report tonight we have accomplished that. So on 11/15 and 11/16, we held 2 days of workshops, and every single uniformed police officer and detective went through the training. So that's pretty much all of our sworn, except for those that might have been out, medical and whatnot. If you recall, we all did the training back in May with members from the Race and Equity Advisory Board and our command staff. I thought that was a great opportunity. The training focused on several key areas, including the history of police and community and the interactions over time and what that means. It focused on how to improve those relationships and whose role it is, right? Police, community, parents, all the above. It focused on the steps officers can take to improve their interactions with the community, understanding what their presence means to some and what the triggers come with that, understanding that words matter and what something means in law enforcement vernacular or approach or style or demeanor is taken much differently than many in our community, and being aware of that and working on that, and how we show up on a regular basis and are we managing ourselves. And the last part of that is the follow-on to, and this is work we will continue on, is what steps are we doing to have these positive interactions with our community that are not related to crisis or 911 calls, right? So there's that. Overall, we did get surveys back from all the officers on the training. Overwhelmingly, it was very positive. In our world, just the nature of police culture, when you do training, which I've done lots of over the years, if you walk away with half the people thinking it was good and half thinking it was not good, then that was successful training. Trust me on that. A little bit of cynicism there, but this was overwhelmingly positive. I would say the approval rate was closer to 90%. And I have a quote here. As you know, Mr. Bryant, it works with law enforcement agencies across the country. He's in high demand. He's teaching this week at the FBI National Academy Associates here in Renton, and there are several agencies that will be contracting him to follow what we did. But in his wrap-up email to me, Mr. Bryant said the following: I was very happy to meet the men and women of Kent PD. They are certainly the most professional and open group of police officers I've had the pleasure of working with. So for a person who's on the national level, hails out of South Chicago, but teaches all over the country, I consider that very high praise and a great, speaks greatly to the quality of people we have in our ranks. So mission or task accomplished, more work to be done in this area. So, and that's my report.
Thank you very much, Chief. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mission accomplished, probably almost there.
Almost there, yeah. I don't want to say it, yeah. I take that back.
Are there any follow-up? I mean, he did such a phenomenal job. I'm just curious, I might have missed if you said it. Maybe coming back and some checks, yeah, maybe moving in, maybe other areas.
Yeah, one of the areas, great question, thank you. One of the areas we I asked him to look at maybe developing some curriculum on he is an expert. His career starts in schools. Before police work, it was all about working with youth in schools. And I told him that I have not been able to locate specific training and techniques that officers might use to be more relatable in communicating with our youth, and particularly our youth of color. So I gave that to him, and I asked him to consider putting something together that we might look at for a future training. So.
Any other questions for the chief? All right, thank you very much
Great,
for
thank
sharing
you.
that. Moving on in the agenda, we will, up next is Consolidating Budget Adjustment Ordinance for adjustments between, I gotta go to my next page, October 1st, 2021 and November 30th, 2021. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I'm Michelle Ferguson, the Financial Planning Manager, and I'll be presenting the fourth quarter budget adjustment for 2021. This fourth quarter adjustment is reflecting an overall budget increase of $31,099,990. Previously approved budget expenditure increases totaled $24,780,850. And budget adjustments that have not been previously approved by council total $6,319,140. For the majority of this presentation, I will be using rounded numbers like normal, but the ordinance and exhibits contain the exact budget expenditure figures. The expenditure increases of nearly $25 million that council has previously approved include $23.5 million in grants and $1.2 million in other changes. The grants included in this budget change are $13.29 million from the U.S. Treasury for the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is more commonly known as ARPA funding. The city has received nearly $14.1 million in ARPA funding in 2021, but a small portion was already approved in the Q3 budget adjustment. An $8 million WashDOT Regional Mobility Grant Program for the Rapid Ride 1 project was approved by council in August of 2021. The proposed project includes constructing rapid ride stations along the Rapid Ride 1 line route within the Kent City limits, as well as access to transit improvements within a half mile of any given stop or station. Also included is a $1.25 million supplemental grant from the U.S. Small Business Administration for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant for COVID-19 emergency assistance at the Essential Showwear Center that was approved by council in November. And there was a $697,000 grant from the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office to assist with funding for the completion of the Downey Side Channel Restoration Project that was approved by council in September. The other council-approved budget changes that total $1.2 million that are included in this amendment are an increase in the general fund for $700,000 for police salaries and benefits to account for the cost of living adjustment, market value adjustment, and compensation for shift changes that was approved by council in September. Also included is $500,000 for a scoreboard at the Essential Showwear Center. In February of 2020, council approved the contract with ASM Global, who provides the services related to the management and daily operations at the event center. This contract included an amendment which required ASM Global to provide the event center with an interest-free capital contribution loan of $500,000 for the purchase of a new scoreboard. The city received these funds last month, and now we are budgeting the expense. The remaining adjustments that total $6.3 million that council has not yet approved include a increase of $2.24 million to 3 different insurance funds. $2 million is needed for the liability insurance fund due to increased charges for judgments and damages and insurance premiums. $125,000 is needed for the workers' compensation fund due to increased charges for judgment and damages. And $117,000 is needed for the property insurance fund due to increased property insurance costs. A budget change of $1.14 million is needed in the debt service fund. There was an error when the budget was created, and a revenue and expense line were each left off the budget for the 2016 LTGO debt. This expense is offset by an increase in revenue, so there is no real impact to the budget. A budget change of $800,000 is needed for the GRNRA South Pump Station project. $400,000 will be transferred out of the drainage fund and into the project, and $400,000 will be budgeted in the project for use of these funds. And then a budget change of $800,000 is needed in the sewer and drainage funds. The adopted budget did not include enough of an expense budget to cover the internal utility taxes that are paid out of these funds. This additional expense is offset by the under-budgeted service charge revenues. A budget change of $700,000 is needed for the King County wastewater pass-through expense that is within the sewer fund. The adopted budget also did not include enough of an expense to cover this increase, and the additional expense is also offset by under-budgeted service charge revenues. A budget change of $200,000 is needed for the shop's parking lot fence project. $100,000 will be transferred out of the utility and capital resources funds and into the project, and then $100,000 will be budgeted within the project. Budget changes totaling $135,000 needed for parks and facilities projects, which include $50,000 adjustment to the public arts budget, $61,000 for park seal coat, $30,000 will be transferred out of the facilities fund and into the project, and then an additional $30,000 will be budgeted in the project for use of those funds. $25,000 for a transfer of parks reinvestment funds to the Chestnut Ridge project, and $10,000 for a youth initiative internship. And the last three are budget change of $100,000 is needed to move the expense for the bridge load rating into a project. It was originally budgeted in operating, and now it needs to be moved to a project. Also, a $90,000 budget change is needed for use of Public Works Life Cycle funds for an overlay project. And a budget change of $77,000 is needed for the Panther Lake Signal Integration Project. Funds will be moving out of a closed project and into this project for use of those funds. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a process question I really don't understand. So we just adopted the budget just recently, right? So a month later, why are we making the adjustment that we did not know? I'm just trying to connect the dots, and just a process question.
Why weren't these done in Q3 adjustment?
Yeah. Just
So-
quite through up here. I'm just.
You're amending 2021 today. We did 2022.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. Thank you. All right.
So, Michelle, on a few of these funds that were under budgeted, did we fix that for 2022
Yes.
so that we won't have that issue?
For most of them, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully on some of the other ones, they're one time and we won't be seeing
Right.
them, but it's not sure yet.
Okay. Any other questions for Michelle?
Thanks for clarifying that. I didn't get it. I didn't see 2021. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
All right. No other questions, then a motion to approve these would be in order.
Seeing none, Madam President, I would move to adopt ordinance number 4421, approving the consolidating budget adjustments made between October 1st, 2021 and November 30th, 2021, reflecting an overall budget increase of $31,099,990.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Michelle. Next up, we have an ordinance amending Chapter 5.01 of the Kent City Code relating to business license, and this requires action. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you very much, Council President Troutner, members of City Council. So tonight I'm actually going to talk to you about a few amendments to the City Code. This first one is on Chapter 5.01 related to business licenses. So as you guys are aware, we took an initiative to go with File Local, which is a group of 10 cities that have come together in order to provide a platform for handling city business licenses as well as B&O taxes. The city has joined as of June 30th the File Local portion to handle just the business license piece of it at this point in time. Just We did go live back in June. Just kicked off, actually, as of today, our business license renewals. So just kind of a tidbit of information for all of you. A little bit behind where we like to be, but we had a little technology work we were still working on. And so that is now up and running, which is great. And so that will be for the 2022 renewals. But what this does is it then now, this amendment to the code is going to update our code to be able to include the fact that businesses can now get their business licenses both through File Local and at the city. So we did want to be able to include that within our code. In addition, it is going to add some clarity to the fact that those people who are applying for a business license in December, that will actually cover them through that following year. So to add that clarity to put in alignment with what our practice is going to be, particularly with File Local and how that product works. In addition, it is going to add some information and clarity around our business license process. Now that this information is being gathered from another location, we need a way to be able to prompt our businesses to make sure that they have provided all the necessary information about their business. And so we do have a clause in there that gives them 30 days to follow up with any questions that we have about missing information for us. Otherwise, their application could be canceled. In addition, one of the things that we've done within this ordinance is to include 4 additional grounds of which we can deny or revoke a business license. And this is for being out of compliance with zoning. So if they're trying to put a business in a zone that doesn't allow for that, we would have the authority to do that. If they are not in compliance with building or fire codes, the rental housing inspection program, as well as other violations within the Kent City Code. That is currently happening when we're looking at home business licenses, but this will kind of be spread out a little bit more now to all the business licenses as they're being routed for approval. And this is related to new business licenses that would go through this process. In addition, what currently happens when there's a denial or a revocation of a business license, what naturally happens is a letter goes out that says the why as to why this is going to be happening, but then also automatically sets a date for a hearing for a person to appeal that. What that then leads to is people not showing up because they wouldn't have appealed this. So what the code is going to do is allow the business 14 days to appeal this and then or to apply for an appeal, and they would have that same up to 60 days to get that scheduled and go through that process. So that will be updated in that as well. And then finally, for those who are choosing not to show up for this, our hearing examiners do cost money. So this does give us the opportunity for the city to ask for reimbursement for costs that are incurred if they choose not to show up for something that they had scheduled. There are a few other small administrative cleanup things that are in there, but that really is the meat of the changes in the ordinance. And I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Paula. Anyone have questions for Paula? All right, makes good sense to me, so.
All right, seeing none, Madam President, I move to adopt ordinance number 4422, amending Chapter 5.01 of the Kent City Code to improve the business license application process pursuant to the city's partnership with File Local to modify the appeal process for business license denials and revocations, and to add additional grounds for which a business license may be denied or revoked.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Paula. Next up is the tax code amendment ordinance.
Yes, so there's a few more things in this amendment, so thank you very much for your patience as we walk through this. So ultimately, we're going to be looking at making some modifications to 3 areas of our code. Chapter 3.18, which has to do with our utility taxes, Chapter 3.28, which is related to B&O taxes, and 3.29, to 9, which is the tax administrative provisions. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through what the significant changes are within these ordinances. Related to the Chapter 3.18, there's very minor changes being made. Really, it's adding definitions or removing some definitions. So it first is going to define the gross income amendment to align with our current practices. And our current practices right now is that we exclude the water, sewer, and drainage service connection fees from the gross income. So we haven't been collecting utility taxes on it, and it seems appropriate to make sure that our code is in alignment to what our practice is. The other thing is, our definition of telephone business is really outdated. It has not kept up with the technologies that are out there. And so that has now been updated more in alignment to what some of our surrounding cities, City of Seattle, et cetera, are doing. And then in there was a section for network telephone service that was just completely removed because all of it was then covered in this new definition of telephone business. So that is all that was happening with the utility tax portion of this. Going into the B&O tax portion, first off with B&O tax, as you guys know, there are two components. We have the gross receipts component as well as the square footage. But if you look at the title that's at 3.28, it calls it B&O tax / gross receipts. And so really we want to take that out so that we are really addressing both of the two taxes that fall within there. In addition to that, there's another section that was slightly modified to be able to address that as well. In addition, the gross receipts, there was a clarification that the gross receipts tax are measured based on the application of a specified rate rather than a percentage of a taxable gross receipts. Really, again, it's a clarity thing within the code. And then the square footage tax would not apply to dwelling units. It was never the intent that we would be applying that to dwelling units, but yet our code could be misleading and people may make that assumption. So we really wanted to clarify that there. In addition, it does clarify that the responsibility of the square footage tax shifts to a tenant only if the tenant is actually engaging in business in that space. So really, again, adding that clarity to the code. The reason for this is in our self-storage rental units, there's a little bit of confusion because you could have businesses that are putting things in there. And as you'll see, we have made some clarity to the self-storage units as well. First off, there was some confusion as to whether people should have been applying the warehouse square footage or the lower other business square footage, and it really should be the lower other business square footage rate and not that higher one. So actually putting that into our code. In addition, when there are tenants are, when there is a rental of a self-storage unit that a tenant has 24-hour access and they have the right to be able to lock and keep people out of there, that is not subject to gross receipts. However, we did make sure that we put clarity in there that it is still subject to that square footage tax. The other item that's in there is talking about the square footage rate that is used by that self-storage business, and that they would be using all of the square footage for all of the units and would not be able to take deductions for people who are conducting business in there. In other words, we're no longer transferring to the tenant, the renter that might be a business, that they have to pay the tax. It really does fall on the self-storage unit. This is the only area of the changes that are happening that would have a very small financial impact. Based on what we are seeing from historical information, it would account for an increased tax liability of about $800 for an entire year. So it's a very small impact, but it adds clarity and actually makes administration of this tax that much easier and more streamlined. So that is the extent of the amendments to the 3.28 business and occupation tax section. And then finally, we have 3.29, the administrative provisions. And there were two things that were done with that. The first off is there is a reference in section 3.2910 that says that the cancellation of penalties applies to subsection C. Well, the reality that should also apply to subsection E, and so it just really confuses matters. So that's been removed from that, which would allow me as the finance director to cancel some penalties in accordance with whatever is in that section instead of just limiting it to section C. And then finally, the other piece of this is clarity regarding the judicial review of a director's determination. So when a taxpayer does have an issue with a tax assessment that has been brought before them, they do have the right to appeal to me. If they don't agree with the appeal that comes to me, then they do have the right to go to the hearing examiner. And once the hearing examiner actually reviews the case and makes a ruling, if the taxpayer still does not agree with that, or if the city does not agree with the appeal or with the ruling of the hearing examiner, then both the taxpayer or the city, either one, would have an opportunity to do a writ of review with King County Superior Court. The way it was written before, it really didn't, the code really didn't jive with our whole internal process of using that hearing examiner, and also didn't provide for the right tool to be able to use to be able to go to Superior Court. So that would clear up both of those two issues. I know that was a lot of information, and I would be happy to do my best to answer any questions that you have on that.
Thank you, Paula. Councilmember Boyce has a question.
Hey, Paula, would it be safe to say, I as a business doing B&O today, based on these changes, there's no significant change to the way I do business today? Would that be a safe statement?
That is correct. Okay. The only thing that changes, everything is falling in line with what we're doing. It did add a little bit more clarity for anyone who wants to go to Superior Court, but the only thing that really will change is probably related to our self-storage business, where they can no longer deduct the commercial businesses that might be storing stuff in their units and then have to transfer that to the business storing stuff in their unit. That's probably the biggest difference.
How do you communicate that to those businesses?
We will be sending out correspondence through, I'm going to call it a business rule, but I don't think that's the right term I'm looking for. But they do have a way of communicating out to our taxpayers on what the rule is, and we will be doing that.
Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Fincher.
You know, the hearing examiners, I will ask it. The hearing examiners, do the hearing examiners have special knowledge in this area?
You know, I'm going to answer that, but I don't really have a great answer. They're the hearing examiner that hears a variety of cases that could come forward. If there's somebody better to answer this would be great. So they're not necessarily a B&O tax expert. They gather the facts. And I am going to turn it over to Pat because I have.
And I'll thank you both.
My answer is not going to be that much better than Paula's. I can just say that the hearing examiners that we use are very, very adept at hearing examiner issues that are basically municipal issues. We work and contract with a firm that has expertise in mostly land use, because that's where most hearing examiner decisions are, but also in things like local taxation. So they know what they're doing. We've had, we occasionally get appeals and we handle them, and they are reasonable, sound decisions that they make, in our opinion. So yeah. So and we pay them, and they earn their money. They dive in, and when they're working for a city, they work for cities all around the region. They have to get to know and understand our code. They spend their time doing it. They issue, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 page decisions, and they're very well reasoned because they know that their credibility is standing on being upheld in the Superior Court. So, because that's the next step for every one of the cities they deal with. So,
all right, thank you very much.
We have a high confidence level.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions for Paula?
All right, seeing none, Madam President, I would move to adopt ordinance number 4423, amending chapters 3.18, 3.28, and 3.29 of the Kent City Code to update definitions related to telephonic businesses and gross income, clarify code language related to business and occupation tax, and to codify current practices related to square footage tax.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Next up is a third quarter investment report. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Joe Bartlemay. I'm the Cash and Investment Officer for our Finance Department, and today I'll be presenting the third quarter 2021 investment report. So, as you can see, at the end of the third quarter, we had just under $12 million in cash, earning 0.7%, and that's an earnings credit that goes towards our U.S. banking fees. We had just over $72 million in the Washington State Local Government Investment Pool. That's the very liquid part of our portfolio. We can access our cash quickly if we need it. That earns currently 0.87% with overnight liquidity. And then we have with our PFM managed portfolio, just almost $204 million, earning 0.95% with an average maturity of just under 3 years. You can see that the market value of $205 million, just over, is a good indication of our high-quality portfolio. The value of our investments, if we were to sell them today, is more than our book value of the investments. In the pie chart below, you can see that we have significant portions of our portfolio in the state investment pool in the red there. And the green is U.S. Treasuries, that very solid, sound investment. And then the various other investment types make up roughly a third of the portfolio. Here we have a 5-quarter comparison, and this is by investment type, so you can see the cash flow throughout the year. The green at the bottom is the cash in the bank. And the purple line next up is the state investment pool. Above that is the PFM managed portfolio. And you can see that throughout the year we've increased that balance in the managed portfolio, reducing the state investment portfolio, moving more of our portfolio towards the long-term investments to squeeze out some more yield with those where the opportunities are. And then you can see at the top there, overall, year over year, our total balance has increased significantly. And then here you can have see a 3-year comparison of total cash and investments. 2019 is that dark line at the bottom with the 2020 in the middle. You can see that those kind of follow our typical trend. This year you can see we started out a little bit above where we were last year, and then mid-year we received some of those one-time funds that you're aware of, those ARPA funds of $14.1 million and streamlined sales tax revenue that was a one-time lump sum from the prior year. So definitely a higher balance that is one-time funds that we received mid-year. Here we have investment interest earnings, 5-quarter comparison again. The dark blue line on the or bar on the left is general fund only, and the lighter blue is all other funds combined. So you can see we're down a little bit in the second quarter. The market is yielding less than it did in prior quarters, but we're back up a little bit in the third quarter as we've reallocated some of those funds towards that longer term portfolio to try to, again, earn a little bit more yield. Here you can see of that total investment portfolio, you can see the balances by fund. So general fund there at the top has a significant balance. Those the streamlined sales tax is in the 1500 fund, the capital resources fund, the ARPA funds are in the other capital projects funds, that 1900 fund. Utility funds, insurance funds have some significant portions along with the capital funds of the portfolio overall. Here we have a summary of just the managed portfolio managed by PFM, our investment advisors. This is excluding cash and the state investment pool. So this is the long-term portfolio. So the pie chart excludes cash and state investment pool. If you can see in the bar chart on the lower left, you can see the maturities for high maturity allocations in the middle, the 1 to 2 and the 2 to 3 years, and we're starting to increase those longer yields as well, where there's, again, a little bit more value available as it is. Here, this is a new slide. This demonstrates our investment policy compliance. It's a little bit different than what you've seen before, but it shows our portfolio balance in the various investment types, including cash and state investment pools. So you can see on the top there, the U.S. Treasuries, we could have up to 100% of our portfolio in Treasuries. We currently have the 43.2%. Various other investment types, Treasuries, federal agencies, state investment pool and cash, you could have 100% of your portfolio if you choose. We're well within policy compliance for all of the various investment types. And then here, this is a new slide as well, and this shows a 4-month comparison of the balances that you saw on the prior slide, but you can see the prior 4 months along with it. So as you can see, in December of 2020, we had my glasses. I think it's roughly $45 million in treasuries and 30, sorry, I'm gonna, my glasses. That's better. So 36% in treasuries, and in the current quarter, we had a little over 60. So as we've reallocated that investment portfolio, and you can see where the new purchases have been in the various investment types. And then at the bottom of the highlighted item, you can see the total portfolio balance. And this is just, again, the managed portfolio excluding cash and state investment pool. And the bar chart at the bottom shows the same information, but just in a bar chart. And that's what I have for you today. Do I have any questions?
Anyone have any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then I'm going to welcome Michelle back to present the October financial report.
Hi, good afternoon again. Michelle Ferguson, presenting the October 2021 financial report. Last month when I presented the September report, I highlighted sales tax. I did it again, but this time for a slightly different reason. Sales tax is still coming in very strong and higher than we saw in 2020, but the revenues are starting to trend downwards. They were through August, from January through August, revenues were about 17% higher than they were in 2020, so that's about $290,000 a month. But over the last 3 months, so September, October, and November, they're down to only 7% over where they were in 2020, or about $125,000. And specifically in November, it was down to only $80,000 more. So Nothing to be alarmed about, but it is something that we will be keeping our eye on as, stimulus money is not coming in as strong. People have gone back to paying their rent and their utilities. So we will see if this is kind of just a little lag or if this trend will continue. On this slide, highlighted other revenues. Other revenues, as you can see, when we look at prior year revenues for 2020 compared to actual revenues in 2021, they are higher for the most part, but they are higher than budgeted, but they're still not where they should be. So we're still anticipating overall for other revenues to come in slightly under budget, but luckily because sales tax has been coming in so strong, overall the general fund still will be benefiting by probably $5 million at year end. On this slide, I've kind of highlighted some of the categories that are not quite where we would expect them to be seen for percent of budget at this time of year. So normally you would be expecting to see about 83% of the budget either being received or expended depending on revenues or expenditures. Other taxes, that's going to be your admissions tax and your gambling tax. And admission tax is just not where it should be, but we have been seeing revenues coming in a little bit stronger over this last quarter, but still recovering, and those will be revenues from the theaters and the Thunderbirds as well as showware. And transfers in, looks like it's having an issue, but we wait till the end of the year to do our the transfer in from the Youth Teen Fund. So that one will be fine by the end of the year. And if you remember last year in 2020, we had a $1 million transfer in from the Health and Wellness Fund, a one-time transfer. And down at the bottom, non-departmental, we wait until the end of the year to do the B&O transfers out to the various projects as well as the street fund subsidy. But that high bump from 2020 to 2021, we had that $4.4 million transfer at the beginning of the year, and so that's why that's so much higher. Highlighted on this slide, just anything that was kind of above that 25% variance. Lodging tax expenditures are obviously lower than they have been in years past, and they were budgeted that way, waiting to see how the revenues came in, so that's as expected. And capital resources funds, still revenues are coming in very strong for sales tax, the streamlined sales tax mitigation also that we've been receiving, as well as the REIT. And expenditures are lower because there was a lot of one-time budgeted expenditures in 2020. And on this slide, we already talked last month about the special assessment debt service and the golf and why those are kind of different. So this time I just went with something different. Central services, that is the fund that is for our internal office supplies and postage. And so those revenues and expenditures are just based on departments' usage of it. So you can see in 2020 with COVID, those expenditures and revenues were down just because of lower usage. And the 2021 expenditures are kind of on par with 2019. Last slide for workers' compensation. We had...
This is not a church? This is not a church?
No, across the street.
We had, so far this year, we've had about $250,000 increase in judgments and damages. So you can see it usually was around $1 million in expenditures, and we've already at 1.3. So hence the increase to the budget that we just did. And it was budgeted to use some fund balance because you can see in 2020 we had surplus. And so the revenues and expenditures are kind of on par, but a little higher than we thought we'd be for expenditures for those judgments and damages. Are there any questions?
All right, anyone have questions for Michelle?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the end of our Operations and Public Safety meeting this evening. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We will gather back here for the same meeting next year. So at the moment, we are adjourned.